The setting is a cell in the Tower of London in November 1660. John Milton is lying on the bed. A jailer opens the cell's wooden heavy door and a man enters. Mr. Milton? John Milton? I'm here from the House of Commons. We have questions for you. You have much to answer for.
A good day to you, sir. Your name?
Samuel Ennis, member of the newly elected House of Commons.
Why am I imprisoned in the Tower of London?
The House ordered our Sergeant-at-Arms to arrest you. You know why. In custody at last, John Milton, the world-famous, infamous divorcer, the man who argued for a right to divorce when love is lacking. Though Jesus himself said no divorce in the Bible, in Matthew, writ down.
You come to argue scripture with me. The one constant message of Jesus is charity. People stuck unloved in bad marriages must be set free to find God's love in this life through God's greatest gift, a caring human companion.
Regardless of what Christ said, no divorce.
The Bible verse was clearly incomplete, a sentence in an impromptu oral argument with Pharisees. It's against the heart of Christ's teaching, and there have always been other grounds for divorce, regardless of what you quote from one verse. Many find my argument compelling, sir.
Or agreeable to their own purposes.
And for that, I'm imprisoned in the tower.
Others said you should be burnt for blasphemy. That was just the start of your quarrelsome career. Then you wrote against censorship by the king's officers that kept the peace.
I have fought, yes, with words, for freedom of thought, speech, and religious conscience.
Freeing endless chaos, a tumult of schisms and vituperation, vile pamphlets full of false reports and calumnies, turning hatreds into civil war. That bloodshed did make your career, no? High office after the revolution.
So, my life is a crime.
Against the king's godly dominion, yes.
But the new king declared an amnesty.
Then how could you be under arrest?
That's my very question. You tell me, please. And what are your qualifications to taunt a blind prisoner in his cell?
I gave a great sum of money to young Charles Stuart to help raise an army and regain his father's throne, as he did.
These are the worldly qualifications indeed.
In your blindness, do you recognize a godly rebuke for your rebellion?
Well, by that logic, Charles I saw a much worse rebuke.
Yes, there's the crux. Think, Mr. Milton, why would the Stuart Restoration lead to your arrest? Maybe something you did, wrote, to further the cruel beheading of King Charles I?
Charles II promised amnesty if he could return as our king.
Yes, he graciously pardoned all past treasons, except one. The so-called trial and murder of his dear father, Charles Stuart, King of England, Scotland, and Ireland, 11 years ago, in a public spectacle that you fanatics made of beheading the Lord's anointed ruler.
I had nothing to do with that.
Really? What about your infamous pamphlet, The Tenure of Kings and Magistrates?
It was published after the death of Charles I.
Well, it's a lengthy work and appeared in print just 2 weeks after the king was murdered. You wrote it before his beheading. You were as much in the plot as the acts.
It's just a history, and it's true throughout.
Your diatribe was read all through Europe and our distant colonies. This was no little deed. It's not forgotten. Let me remind you of the full title, The Tenure of Kings and Magistrates, proving that it is lawful and hath been held so through all ages for any who have the power to call to account a tyrant or wicked king, and after due conviction, to depose and put him to death.
With many examples from history, I express the right and need to overthrow a tyrant like, yes, Charles I, the man who set his own 3 kingdoms at war with each other, invaded each in turn, and attacked his own subjects, all to make each man yield his conscience to follow instead the king's demands as to what we could say even in our prayers to God.
There's our blind Samson. Where have you been? King Charles II landed in England to claim his throne amid jubilation, but you hurried into hiding.
I retired to a quieter place once my service to the Commonwealth ended.
You moved where no one could find you. We looked. Proof of your knowledge of guilt, Mr. Milton? A twinge of fear in your special conscience? Is it true? You faked your own funeral so we'd think you died?
No, that's absurd. That's a lie.
The Amnesty Act passed and you came back. You need to be in London? The print shops are here. Perhaps you've come to print a new pamphlet against our new king?
No.
I should hope not. You'll print more poems? Like the one we found in Sir Henry Vane's papers, your poem praising him. He's your neighbor now, housed in another cell in this tower since July.
He opposed the late king's execution and took no part.
As you would know from the scheming within your council of state, your circles of power, a man of Vane's abilities, as you praise in your little poem, is dangerous for fighting us well and not turning to fight for the new king at the end as others did. He'll be beheaded. He's no commoner like you are. Punishment for treason for commoners is harsher. Hung briefly, then tortured and torn apart. 10 so-called judges at the late king's trial suffered that agonizing end just weeks ago before gawking gleeful crowds in Charing Cross. You knew the men, I'm sure, fellow plotters. What's ahead for you, Mr. Milton? Such a painful public penance soon?
You think the gruesome public murder of a blind scholar for writing the truth of history would be edifying? Would do you or your cause any good?
Some of the judges had grown quite old, but not too old for final justice.
Unlike them and Dear Sir Henry Vane, I was not excluded from amnesty in the act. By law, you must let me go.
But there's another provision in the act. Parliament may remove anyone it chooses from the promise of amnesty.
And that's a promise not kept.
But it is the law. The people's house, not the king, charges you. Your pamphlet was part of the murder plot. You thought yourself safe. Now here you are.
But the king's promise.
I'd advise you not to quibble about His Majesty's word.
Am I the only one arrested by the House of Commons?
Would you suggest anyone else? So far, there is one other, a London preacher, John Goodwin. John Goodwin, who also wrote a defense of the late king's beheading. You know him?
He is a man of sound principles and faith.
So, you have another friend in the tower. Goodwin, Sir Henry Vane, and you. All here. Each sits alone in chills and shadows. November feels cold in the tower, no? The weeks ahead will be even colder. If only there were some way I could help you. Something you could do to mitigate your crimes.
I have a little money.
Sir, I'm not looking for a bribe. That would take more money than you have. No. I'm wondering how a man of your skills, as a writer at great length and in Latin, the language of diplomacy, might be of service to the Restoration. How you could be valued by our new king, just as the Commonwealth knew your merit. Or shall you shiver here through winter, awaiting torture and execution? I'm giving you, Mr. Milton, my best advice. Your path to freedom is to write. You should compose another pamphlet honoring our new King Charles II and his restoration of England's greatness. The end of discord is in peaceful civil discourse such as you will write now. Say our glorious King is gracious and forgiving. He restores harmony. 2 decades of war and strife fade under his, the true protectorate. We all owe him our faith and allegiance. Etc., as they say in Latin. Give your examples from ancient history. Do a Latin version too, to send abroad from the all too well-known pen of John Milton, the former rebel, reformed. That will make a great impression, not least upon our king and his close counselors. Think it over, then get to it quickly. You don't have a lot of time. Stew on it if you must, briefly, then do it. It's your best hope. Agree and show me progress within a week. Tell the jailer you wish to see Samuel Ennis again. We can send a lad to whom you can dictate. Good day, sir. Jailer, done with Mr. Milton.
Wait! You're correct. I am free when I'm writing, but not more political pamphlets. I've devoted 20 years to government and diplomacy and seen everything delayed, reversed, abandoned. I now will only write poems. All of my youth I gave to learning how to, and now I shall return to it. I will swear that I will write no more on politics.
So you won't write what I asked for the king?
Well, for the king and for myself, I will write only poems and only on biblical themes.
There's much politics in the Bible. We won't write Bible themes with half-hidden allusions to our politics. No satires.
Only the truth of the Bible.
No contradicting the word of Christ or King.
I've started an epic poem on the fall of man. It will take years of concentrated work.
The fall of man, but really the fall from power of you dour fanatics.
No, a more fateful and tumultuous fall, older and omnipresent, into sin.
You will swear. No political writing. Quiet scribbling of Bible poems only.
Yes, I swear.
I will take that to the king's counselors. Pray your silence serves the king well enough.
I pray for the grace of his restoration.
Writing a thick pamphlet praising our new king would be a better sign of grace.
It's all about connections among these Popinjay royalists, influence and intrigue. Well, I have high-placed friends who've not been executed or imprisoned. Andrew Marvell was elected again to the House of Commons, and he must gather my defense there with whispers and bold speeches. My brother is a leading attorney in the Lincoln's Inn and can advance the most plain or subtle arguments. I'm just a blind scholar poet, weak and thrown down, who would want to wear my blood in town. Dear God, please know I pray to you, and not in rote words crammed into my mouth by a fool for a king. I pray in my soul's outcries, tormented thoughts hammered into truth on the anvil of my many sins. Dear God, give me new strength. Allow me years to write praise of your harsh justice from my fears.